So we got to get back to this New Orleans thing. I'm not a Tucker Carlson fan. Tucker Carlson has a guy on who has a documentary out on suicide bombers.
I think that's the one I'm talking about.
That could be. All I
Peter,
know is
Peter or something or other begins with an L. Okay,
sounds like it.
Yeah,
anyway,
that's what we're talking
Carlson's
about.
first question was, what is it that motivates these people?
Yeah.
Is it hatred? And I'm sitting there going, you're an idiot! Of course it's hatred! They're not doing this killing innocents because they like it. And I thought, unfortunately, that's the mindset we have in this country. We worry more about why they are the way they are as opposed to, hey, they are the way they are. Whatever historical mistakes we made, it's too late now, pal. We either got to fight or we're going to be buried in the process. Let's get back to New Orleans.
All right.
So you got the 4 cases that you were involved in.
That I submitted to them, and he said to me over the phone, he said, I wish I could come up and kiss you, because they knew what they had investigatively, and they were moving against, by the way, and still today, some people that are a little reluctant because of the image, and the medical society is raising a fuss and so on. What did you want from these doctors? They were under pressure and so on. So there are a lot of things that are happening, some of which I can't discuss, except to say that I've already told you the hospital is owned by a national corporation. I will tell you that there were helicopters available on that Thursday. So the 29th was a Monday, the 31st was Wednesday, the Thursday was the 1st. There were helicopters stacked up one on top of the other, ready to take them out of the hospital.
Well, now that's where I got to jump in with this.
Some of them were just not placed on those helicopters.
All right, wait a minute. I'm going to ask the question which you may have just answered, okay, before my getting to the question. You're involved in 4 cases. There were 24 cases.
A lot more now.
Okay, but right now we're looking at approximately a couple of dozen.
Yeah.
Different healthcare providers, different doctors, different nurses, but this all happens at the same time.
Not different healthcare providers. There's just the one hospital, and most of the deaths, they're basically on 2 floors. Most of them are on the 7th floor, which is leased out to an outfit called Healthcare.
Okay.
And then there's some patients.
Oh, healthcare outfit. I'm sorry, not healthcare provider. Okay. But has there been any, and again, I know very, very little about this. Has there been anything said on the part of those accused, i.e., we were in such desperate situations, such dire straits, and that seems to be what you need to be negating in terms of when these helicopters available. But here's my, let me jump in, okay? The 4 folks that you're most intimately familiar with, what was the time frame between death number 1 and death number 4? Was it a matter of days, weeks?
Yeah, they died within. Those 4 died on the same day.
Same day.
Same day.
And all had the same drugs in them.
Now, here's a problem, you see, for the forensic pathologist. There's no electricity and there's no cooling. The bodies are then placed in a chapel, and that's so, they had to be placed somewhere.
Sure.
And they're not autopsied for 2-3 weeks. Now, they're in better shape than the ones I autopsied that were floating around in water for 3 weeks. Yeah. And I don't want to describe those to you. I don't think your listeners will be excited about that. But those are the cases that I dealt with, my 30 cases. Now, these in Memorial Hospital, they were not outside in 95-degree temperature and 95% humidity, which is what were the prevalent weather conditions at the time. However, they were inside with no cooling at all. So you got a problem there, but toxicology, nevertheless, could be done.
All right, but let me back up. What are these folks? Again, has anybody been formally charged?
Yes.
Okay.
The doctor and 2 nurses.
All right. The doctor and 2 nurses who have been formally charged, are they essentially saying, yes, we did this, but we did this because of the extraordinary circumstances? Just give me yes or no, and that'll follow up with a question.
They are not saying it, but their defenders
their defenders are saying it. Okay,
yes,
okay.
Yes.
And you're suggesting, with this helicopter schedule that you were giving me, that would be bogus. Because the helicopters were there to take these folks out.
Yes.
Why the hell would you do something like that then?
Well, when all of this is disclosed, you'll have me back
There's a lot.
And,
you're not telling me. Okay.
You know what you said at the beginning of the program about this thing with Carr and the Ramsey case?
Right.
And if you submitted it to a publisher, it would be rejected?
You tell me this is bizarre, that bizarre.
When this is all written out, somebody's going to say to you, well, man, what an imagination you have, baby.
You're kidding.
How about going home
and toning
it down a little bit?
I can tell by the look on his face it is. My God. I want to back up. One other quick question. We're going to talk about JFK. Cyril Wecht on AM News Talk 1360. what's his face, a car, and the thing with the professor, yada, yada, yada. Tracy, thank you. This guy certainly wasn't the first guy to confess to killing John Benet Ramsey. I'm assuming there were 4 or 5 of these characters, okay. Is that, how do I say this? Is that more common than the average schmo like me would believe, that there's a sensational murder and invariably 2 or 3 guys come in and say, I did it?
Yes. The more notorious, heinous, infamous the crime, the greater the celebrity of the victim, either at the time of the fatality or subsequent thereto, such as with Ramsey, the more likely is it that there will be people who will step forward and want to take credit. Absolutely. Including,
what
of
is
course,
their story?
including people who are in jail for life or long-term sentences, as long as they were out at the time and who could have done it, because then, they're big shots. Although you got to be careful with a child when you're in prison. But if it's not a child and it's somebody
a child
else,
is not something. If you're in jail, you don't want to confess to having anything to do with John Benet Ramsey. You're dead meat. Yeah.
Which, by the way, I was quite interested and fascinated by with John Mark Carr talking about killing this little girl, and they gave you, as if it were a printed schedule, where he would be, what flight, and
well, they told what he had for lunch and blah blah blah.
Well, no, but my point is that the lunch was another matter. But what I'm talking about is, if some crackpot wanted to do him in, you knew you had his dance card for the day.
Well, that was the whole thing. That's the whole thing you kept with the tie thing. Okay, the tie thing. All these 9 zillion reporters, and I'm saying
it was
Thailand.
Oswald.
I know nothing about. Okay, I expected to see Oswald come out of the crowd, or Jack Ruby, but as Lenny Bruce said, that was even a Jewish shot. If you remember remember the Lenny Bruce line? So it was even a Jewish shot. Bang, gotcha. Jeez. Let's talk about, there was some new evidence that came forward on this Kennedy thing. I didn't read it very closely. I wanted to talk to you about it because I know you were interviewed by the True Review.
2 eminent scientists from the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in Livermore, California, Dr. Eric Randish and Pat Graham, who is in charge of the forensic science division of that, who have not been JFK critic researchers. You know what I mean? They're not from our gang, so to speak.
That's a wonderful description.
Right, but we've come to know them and embrace them, and they'll become honorary members. So they did a study. Why did they do a study? Because in 1977, 78, 79, the House Select Committee on Assassinations got Dr. Vincent Gwynn, a top scientist at the time, a foremost expert on neutron activation analysis, which can identify minuscule particles of material and give you their composition metallurgically and so on. He came forward with the conclusions that his study of the fragments removed in the autopsy of Kennedy and the surgical procedures on Governor John Connally, that those fragments could be matched, and they came only from 2 bullets. And the only reason he probably said 2 bullets is because they came from different parts of the anatomy of those 2 people, so they had to go for 2 bullets. So the Warren Commission people seized upon that as their proof of the single bullet theory. Now, for those who have never listened to Doug Hoerth and Cyril Wecht, you got to just say the single bullet theory is the essence, the sine qua non, the keystone of the Warren Commission report's conclusions regarding a sole assassin. If you don't have a single bullet theory, then you got 2 people shooting. The single bullet theory holds that 1 bullet went into Kennedy's back, out his neck, into Connally's back, through the lung, broke 4 inches of his right fifth rib, exited from the front of the governor's chest, re-entered the back of the governor's right wrist, exited from the front of the governor's wrist after shattering the bone, the distal radius, and exited and re-entered the governor's left thigh, producing 7 wounds, therefore, in these 2 men, and emerging near pristine with only 1.5% of his total weight lost. Now, that's the single bullet theory, because the timing of the test firing of the alleged murder weapon, this Manicure Carcano, a bolt-action non-automatic, requires 2.3 seconds in the hands of the best marksman. Oswald was a stinky marksman, and the shots shown on the Zapruder film unquestionably indicate that Connally is hit 1.5 seconds after Kennedy is hit the first time. So that's when they had to come up with the single bullet theory to explain how could it have been that one person did all the shooting, and they said the reason is because one bullet produced 7 wounds in 2 men. Okay, so that comes to Vincent Gwynn and neutron activation analysis. Enter Dr. Randish and Pat Graham. They say, hey, we want to look into this, all this hullabaloo. So they conducted metallurgical studies, and what their conclusions are.
And they did this with the fragments of what now?
No, they did it then with batches of metal from hundreds and hundreds of other bullets.
I see.
Hundreds. And their study, their findings, constituted the lead article in the last edition of the Journal of Forensic Sciences, which is the official publication of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences.
All right, and their conclusions, summarize their
conclusions are that with these fragments, they did study these fragments, yes.
Now, when we say these fragments, we're about from Kennedy's body, the fragments from Kennedy.
Right, okay. That those fragments are most likely from 5 bullets, up to 5 bullets, and what do their studies show? You ready for this? That the very same bullet, upon fragmentation, with study, metallurgical analysis of the fragments from one bullet, can produce different levels of antimony, which is the key substance that they're testing for, lead, antimony, and bismuth, so that you cannot even say that you have fragments that can be attributed to one bullet. And that's even from the same bullet. Now, when you have 2 bullets, even from the same batch, you may have different levels of antimony, and you cannot be sure. So this has blown the basis.
Has Michael Biden responded to this? Have you talked to Michael? I'm dying to hear what he has to say. Yeah.